We were talking earlier this hour about the state's attorneys from 33 Illinois counties that back the challenge to Illinois' gun and magazine ban. If you missed that conversation, you can go check that out. It's already clipped out on the YouTube channel, Bishop on Air. Just check it, and you can watch it. But just to look at some of the overpoints that the 33 states' attorneys filed to the Illinois Supreme Court supporting overturning Illinois' ban on certain types of weapons. You can pull up the actual filing through the Illinois Supreme Court's website. They essentially say that statistics prove the weapons magazines banned by the state's ban are in, quote, common use. They also argue that neither semi-automatic weapons nor 10-plus capacity magazines are dangerous and unusual, and that most common use of weapons banned by the act are lawful common use. They also talk about how the balancing of interests versus states' public safety, can that cancel out rights? They say that needs to be rejected, and there's no historical tradition in America banning semi-automatic rifles and handguns. The Illinois State Rifle Association Executive Director Richard Pearson, I chatted with him yesterday to get a preview of what's going to come up in the federal courts, because the 33 states' attorneys filed in the state Supreme Court, but you've got separately 4 cases that are challenging Illinois' gun ban in federal court, and we'll hear from Richard Pearson in a moment. But Governor J.B. Pritzker was talking with students at Harvard University yesterday about politics, and he laid out some of the question about how to combat violence in Chicago, especially with a new mayor coming into town. Here's what the governor had to say yesterday at Harvard University.
Well, let's start with the new mayor, a terrific, I would say, young new mayor, although he's 47, a lot younger than I am. And he is somebody who's been involved in politics for a long time, understands how to get things done. And I know it's my job as governor to lift up, this is, 20% of the population of the state is in Chicago. It's also, the Chicagoland area is 60 or 70% of the economy of the state of Illinois. So success for Chicago means success for the state. We also need the rest of the state to succeed. And so the new mayor, my job is to work well with him. That's why I didn't endorse anybody in the mayoral election. I may have opinions about things and share them privately with my family, but it was important to me that whoever wins, that I was going to be their ally in getting things done for the city. One of the challenges, and there are a number, but one of the challenges that we seek to overcome in Chicago, of course, is gun violence. And it's something that I've taken seriously as governor. I created the office addressing gun violence in our state, and appointed a leader who had come out of the violence prevention world. He had run organizations on the ground in Chicago. His name's Chris Pearson, and these are organizations that engage young people in jobs rather than in violence, engage the communities in fighting against or standing against gangs, preventing people from joining gangs, and so on. Very successful organizations, and I had already had a very strong affiliation and belief in those organizations. That is an important, what I will describe as a near-term but medium-term solution to gun violence. It shouldn't be forgotten, because we can all talk about, banning assault weapons, which I did in the state of Illinois. And we ought to be doing that nationally. But and we also banned switches, which turn a gun into an automatic weapon. And we banned high-capacity magazines. So we ought to be doing all that nationally. But we just did that in January. And by the way, it's all tied up in courts right now, and we'll see, could end up at the Supreme Court. But 8 other states have passed automatic weapons bans. Look, I believe that you have to address it short, medium, and long term. The long-term solutions are addressing poverty in communities all across the state, and particularly in the city of Chicago. Brandon Johnson believes that too, that we've got to address poverty. We've got to lift people up who've been left out and left behind. Again, I've been in office for 4 years, longer than well, he was a county commissioner, but he's now mayor, and I've been governor for 4 years already. We've been working on these things, but I believe that we will be great partners in addressing short, medium, and long-term solutions to gun violence.
So the governor says part of the short term is to ban certain types of weapons, and he acknowledges it's tied up in courts right now. One of those that's challenging that, a group of plaintiffs from 4 different groups. One's the Illinois State Rifle Association. I talked with Richard Pearson, the executive director, yesterday. He kind of gave us an overview of where we're at right now.
Well, we've been getting ready for this day for a long time. We've been doing all the filings, all the kind of boring stuff that you have to do. But the day has finally come for the oral arguments, which will be Wednesday. And we're looking forward to that. We have a battery of attorneys that we think are very, very good. In fact, I know they're very, very good. And we'll be presenting our case for a preliminary injunction before the U.S. Court for the Southern District of Illinois in East St. Louis.
So we'll be there in East St. Louis tomorrow to make sure that that's covered, and we'll bring you the very latest, not just on Twitter as it happens, but also we'll discuss it Thursday morning, no question. So be sure to like and subscribe, and even find me on Twitter. Even if you aren't on Twitter, just search Bishop on Air, really everywhere, and you can stay connected. But Pearson says that if they succeed and get a preliminary injunction, that's going to be good for everyone, not just these one-off, temporary restraining orders for named plaintiffs. If they get a preliminary injunction, that is going to be good statewide. And you heard the governor just say, hey, there were 8 other states that have bans of certain types of weapons. Well, to Richard Pearson, what makes this case different?
Well, there have been other assault weapons bans upheld by the court, but not the Supreme Court, and none since the Bruin decision. And the Bruin decision changed everything on how the law was applied. It said you have to have stricter scrutiny, and you have to make sure that the firearms that they are trying to ban are not in common use. And there's hardly any firearms more in common use than semi-automatic rifles and handguns.
Now, Pearson also talks about expecting the outcome within 2 to 4 weeks, and he's got a prediction of what that outcome could be in the Southern District federal courts.
Well, I think I'm going to predict that we'll get a preliminary injunction, and that the state will immediately appeal it, and so we headed to the 7th District in Chicago, and hopefully the case is argued well enough, we've prepared well enough, that it can go before the United States Supreme Court, and we can get a ruling there.
So it's expected, regardless of how the outcome is in the Southern District of Illinois, it's going to be appealed to the 7th Circuit Court of Appeals for the U.S. For the U.S. federal courts, and then from there, you can imagine either way it goes, it's likely going to go all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, and this could be a pretty impactful case, not just for Illinois, but for the entire country. So we'll obviously follow that as close as we can. But the timing of all of this, Pearson says, is important. Of course, Monday was when you had the next phase of the state's ban on certain types of weapons kick in, saying that you can get a felony if you have a certain type of weapon in a place that you're not supposed to have it, according to the law. Or you could face a petty offense for having a certain magazine over a certain capacity. It could be a $1,000 fine. And then you get to another moment, another phase of the state's gun ban kicking in, and that is the state's registration of grandfathered guns, where you're going to be compelled by law, starting October 1st through January 1st, to register your so-called assault weapons that the state legislature has banned, it's made illegal. You're going to have to tell the state how many of those you have. And that's going to have to happen between October 1st and January 1st unless this law is overturned. Here's Richard Pearson.
Well, it's very important because people are very confused. It is a very poorly written law at best. But it attacks the wrong people. They don't want to really prosecute criminals anymore in the state of Illinois, and a lot of other states too. And so that's what we're asking for, not in this suit, but please prosecute the criminals. And a lot of this misuse will go down if you actually take the laws that you have, like the red flag laws, and apply them properly. then people like the shooter in Highland Park wouldn't have ever gotten a firearm.
So again, Richard Pearson with the Illinois State Rifle Association. Some might push back and say red flag laws are unconstitutional because you're innocent until proven guilty in this country. But that's another conversation for another day, and actually other courts are taking that issue up as well in other states. So this obviously is going to be a fast-moving, dynamic issue that continues to be at play in state legislatures, but also in state and federal court here in Illinois, and we'll be tracking all of that for you. I'm Greg Bishop. Thanks for hanging out each and every weekday.